We all know that communication skills are crucial for any relationship. And when somebody has those skills, oh my gosh, they make so much of an impression to you and to me. But we've also had those moments where we're really nervous to talk with people because we don't know how our request or our message will be received. Well, this podcast, fortunately, is going to go over all the things, the science, the tips, the tricks, and the ways to make sure that you can have the best relationships that you can through the way that you communicate. And after listening to these episodes, you can do so fearlessly with confidence, knowing that you can be relatable to anybody you choose. Welcome to the Attractive Relationships Podcast. What I'm about to share with you, once you hear these things, you won't be able to unhear it. And it's so incredibly powerful because you're going to start to see how people are persuasive in advertisements or maybe a salesperson. You're going to start to see certain patterns of how people try to persuade you on their idea, product, or service. And the cool thing is that with the information that you're about to learn, you too can become more persuasive than you ever have before. So welcome to this episode of Attractive Relationships, and where we focus on communication and how we talk and interact with other people so we can get more of what we want, so you can get more of what you want. And how do you become more persuasive? Now, most people approach persuasion with a mind to try to convince other people through logic, through passion, or some sort of magical phrase or training that they had. So like, for example, I think the most common example that we might use is the car salesman, right? Maybe somebody comes in and tries to hit you with a lot of passion. It's like, oh, we got some deals for you. You've probably seen some commercials like that. All right. Or you have your boss that comes to you and they try to reason with you with a bunch of logic. Here's why we need to do certain things. All right. Or, you're going to buy a new iPhone or a new Android device, and they say, this is the reason why you need this device. And they start hitting you with all the logic on why you need the device. Or if you work in corporate, like I've been through so many trainings on how to sell, and most of those trainings have you or me doing most of the talking to our prospective client or customer, and we're engaging in conversation, but in the end we're doing most of the talking, and we're supposed to say some magical phrase or use some magical script, and they're all of a sudden gonna be like, you're right, I want to buy right now. And yet we've all been in those situations where we realize not only were we not sold when people were trying to use this magical phrase or this script, we weren't always sold just because somebody had a bunch of passion or logic. We probably find that when we talk to other people, that they're not as easily sold just because we're passionate or make a lot of sense, or just because we used a magic phrase or script that we learn in some corporate training. And so here at Attractive Relationships, when you use attractive persuasion techniques and principles, it's not about making somebody be interested into whatever it is that you're trying to sell. It's not about making them desirous. It's about aligning what already is important to them with what you're trying to then sell. I'm gonna say that again. You're not trying to make them curious. You're not trying to make them interested. You're not trying to make them desirous. What we want to do is align what is already important to them with what you are selling. And there are three things that are important to everybody, regardless of if you're selling an idea, product, or service. There are three things that are important to everybody that it's important to know and understand when you're trying to be persuasive to anybody. And you can identify these, if you can identify these three things in the other person, and then align what you're selling with those things, you will be exponentially more persuasive. And I'm about to tell you what those three things are, and I'm going to tell you how you see this in everyday life, especially like maybe in commercials and advertisement. So here are the three things. The three things that are important to everyone, regardless of whatever it is that you're trying to sell, is that what's important to the other person is what reward are they going to get for buying into you, whatever you're selling. That's number one. Number two, what is the other person's ideology? In other words, what do they truly believe? And number three, what affects their ego? That's it. All right. If the other person can see that the reward that they get is massive compared to whatever they're going to buy into, if what you're selling aligns with what they truly believe, or if what you're selling aligns with their ego, in other words, how they see themselves and how they want to portray themselves to the world, how they want to be seen. All right, if you can enhance how they're going to be seen to others or align with how they see themselves, that's their ego. If you do one or more of those things, you enhance your persuasion. And again, the more of those you can identify and connect with what you're selling to one of those three things, the more of these three things you can connect to, the better. So how do we begin the process of attractive persuasion? The alignment of what you're selling to their values and what matters to them. Well, if you've been on this podcast long enough, you know there's the 3 C's, and the first C is always starting and leading with curiosity. Now, this is where you're going to start to, I'm going to use some examples that a lot of us have seen on TV. And maybe if you are a millennial like me, if you can think back a long time ago, I'm going to share some experiences that still will resonate for some of you Gen Zers if you're watching or listening to this podcast. So how do you begin attractive persuasion? Again, you start with curiosity, and you do this in a way that opens what we call a mind gap or a mind loop. All right, so you can imagine, like, you got a loop that you're going to draw, and you don't quite connect the circle. And that is the gap. That's the loop that's not connected. And we lead with curiosity to open up that person's mind. And then later in the process, we will bridge the gap. We'll connect the loop. And of course, we do that by offering the idea that we're trying to sell. Hey guys, real quick, I am sure that all of us have had the moments where we're a little nervous or afraid to talk to somebody because we don't know how they're going to respond. Are we going to be able to talk to our life partner without them getting upset? Or are we going to talk to our boss to get that raise or that interview for that job? If we ever get nervous in those moments, we have to fearlessly communicate in a way that's effective to get the things we want and need. And if you want to know how to consistently do that, there's a formula and a program on exactly how to do that. And it's called the Be Fearless and Effective Communicators Program. If you are interested in learning more about that, you can click the link that's in the show notes, or you can go to attractiverelationships.com/fearless. So here's an example, and this is again an example. It doesn't exist anymore, but if you ever thought about, like, how in the world did we start to buy bottled water? And let alone, some of this bottled water is very expensive. How did this even become a thing? Well, I remember clearly because, again, I'm an elder millennial. I've been around for a bit. And years ago, here's how it happened. Somebody decided to open a mind gap or a mind loop by presenting an issue that people didn't know existed. Here's how they did it. Somebody would come and knock on your door, and then you'd open up and they're like, hey, we're here to sell you this water filtration system. And what they would do, they said, did you know, this is where they start to open up that mind gap. Did you know that your water has so many billions and bajillion contaminants? And the other person was like, no, that's not true. But it got them thinking, like, is that true? That's the mind gap. Just like that. So simple. And then to reinforce that gap, this person would come into the person's home and filter out their tap water. And then you would see like sediment and all kinds of other crap that's in there. And now the person's like, oh my God. And now the person's like, we have a problem. And guess what? With that, when you see their reaction, now we move on to step 2, right? You've opened up this mind gap, this mind loop. And step 2 is to really listen for their interest, for their feelings, for their values, because how they respond to that mind gap or that mind loop that you've introduced will reveal one of those 3 things we talked about. Are they going to be looking for a reward? Are we going to align with something that they truly believe, their ideology? Or are we going to align our product with something that pairs well with their ego? Right? So for example, somebody would be like, oh my gosh, I really believe that we need to be healthy. Like that's an ideology of something that they really believe. And so now you can be like, well, now you can be healthy with this. And this is that 3rd step, water filtration system. And you align what you have with what they really believe, as an example. And that's how bottled water started happening. And in the commercials, it was the same thing. In commercials, it was like, man, your tap water is dirty. Buy our bottled water instead. and that's how that happened. It's very similar to Swiffer. If you remember Swiffer, it was like, do you really want to go through the hassle, of using your dirty, dingy mop to just sling your repeated dirty mess all over the house and then have to go through the burden of getting some big ass bucket to wring out your dirty mop just to put that dirt everywhere else, and then you have to clean it, which it doesn't even get clean. And so all this like mind gap, mind loop is like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this was such a big deal. I pride myself on being a clean person. That's ego. Or, man, I would love to save some time when I'm cleaning. That's reward. And Swiffer came in and identified with both reward and ego. They're like, buy our Swiffer mop. You no longer have to worry about spending all this time using your dirty old nasty mop, and you can be cleaner, which aligns with who you are as a person. And that's why Swiffer exists. And I'll give you one more example to align with the ideology. Well, you think about the method. I'm using a lot of cleaning products because it's easy to use the analogies. Method did the same thing. Do you care about the earth and the planet? And you're tired of using some chemicals? Like, did you know like these chemicals that we use are very harsh and bad for the planet? I didn't know. That was the mind gap. All right. And aren't you the type of person that cares about the planet? As a matter of fact, I am. Now you're tying it to ideology, and then you bring your solution to align in with that person's ideology. That's how the method brand got started. And so you can use this attractive persuasion, these tactics and these understandings of how you are being persuaded when you're speaking to others. I'm going to use a ridiculous example. Let's say you were with a roommate or your life partner and you're talking about folding laundry. I think I've used this example before in a previous podcast, but it seems to be very controversial sometimes. And I think there's usually one person who really cares and one person who does not care. But what if by chance you and your roommate and you and your life partner both equally care passionately about how your towels are folded? All right. Who's going to win? The one who is presenting the most logic or the most passion, or the one that can use some magical phrase to... None of that's going to work very well. So how can you use the 3-step method where you open a mind gap, you listen for their interests, feelings, and values, and then align your solution with their interests and feelings and values? How can you do that in an instance that's so ridiculous like folding towels? All right. So if somebody's folding towels and you don't like the way they're folding them, how you got to introduce that mind gap or that mind loop. You could do that in a few ways. Is like, have you always folded towels this way? Or is this the only way you've ever folded towels before? You see that what happened right then and there? The other person's going to have to say, yes, this is the only way I've only folded towels before. Or no, I've folded other towels, but this way's the best. It doesn't matter. You've gotten them thinking about other ways to fold towels. And you could move on to step number 2, or because you are an expert communicator, you might ask a follow-up question. What got you to fold towels this way as opposed to any other way? All right? And that's going to be really revealing, because they might be like, I don't know why I fold towels this way. Or they might say, I found this to be the fastest way. Or they might say, my mother taught me how to fold towels this way, or my dad taught me how, and this is just the way I've always done it. But even whatever their response is, they're probably going to tell you that they fold towels this way because they believe this is the best way because their parents taught them, or they believe this is the best way because it saves them time, which is the reward. All right. It's probably not going to matter so much about ego on how you fold towels, but you've opened a mind gap. You've listened for what matters to them. And now you introduce a new idea. Hey, what if I told you there's a faster way to fold towels? What if I told you there's another way to fold towels that saves space? All right. Now they are more receptive to an idea that you are trying to sell them. I hope this makes sense to you. This takes a little bit of practice, and so that's why when I coach people one-on-one, we actually go through some scenarios to try to get this process more ingrained. Because when you do, you are different from most people who just try to say, hey, why don't you fold towels this way? Here's the reason why, and here's all the logic, and I'm going to be very passionate about it, and then wonder why people don't want to listen to you as much. You are going to be different. You are going to be able to be more persuasive and still likable, not in the used car sleazy way, not into the I'm going into a retail store and somebody's clearly working on commission kind of way. But you're going to do it because you do it in the attractive communication style of leading with curiosity, maybe even sprinkling a little bit of empathy in, and following the techniques that follow the principle. And like I said, now that you know this stuff, you're going to start seeing these things on the commercials, whether it's on the radio or on the TV, that people are advertising to try to connect to either a really good reward, they're connecting to people's ideology, or to your ego. You're going to see that way more often. And now you have the skills to be able to communicate in a way that helps you to get more of what you want. Now, if you are interested in the coaching program, make sure to follow the link in the show notes. It'll get you straight there. In fact, your first coaching one-on-one with me is completely free. I just want to help. So if that is of interest to you, I look forward to talking with you in person. Or until next time, I look forward to catching you on the next episode. As we come to the end of another episode of Attractive Relationships, I want to express my gratitude to you for tuning in. Your support really does mean the world to me. Now, if this episode brought you any value, I would truly appreciate it if you shared this podcast with anyone that you think could benefit from our discussions on effective communication and relationship building. Until next time, remember, great relationships start with great communication. So stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep building those attractive relationships.